So let's not fight each other.
Right.
Let's be unified so that when the project says, I'm rearing my head and I want to fight, we as a team can say, we've got this.
Yeah. And we were aligned.
Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
You and I were. And the rest you'll have to pay a subscription fee for the rest of that story. Today on the Curious Builder podcast, we had Mary Wozniak in from Shadow Falls Design. I've known Mary, well, I should say she's known me for 44 years, my entire life. Longtime family friend, uber talented designer. Without further ado, here is Mary Wozniak. Welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, the host. Today, I'm joined with a very special guest. I've got Mary Wozniak in from Shadow Falls Design. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you.
So you've known me since before I was born.
I have.
That's a long time coming. Why don't, it's funny because we had Billy Beeson on last week before you, and he had known. So everyone's going to think, oh man, you only have these people that have known you forever. But I think that's what's so fun about the business that we're in is these long-standing relationships.
Right.
And then you and I actually had the privilege to work together on a project, and hopefully some other ones coming up here at some point in the future as well. And so I wanted to bring you in, obviously, hear your story and how you got to be an entrepreneur and where you find yourself at today. So
thank you.
Let's go back to the beginning. Tell us about this young girl in St. Paul and how you've become, this powerhouse designer that you have become. And
wow, thank you. Yeah. It's been a fun ride. So I studied journalism in school and was married. And right after we were married, my husband bought a business as just an investment on Grand Avenue in St. Paul, which was our neighborhood. And one day I was just, chatting with him about goals and things I wanted to do. And after renovating a condominium of ours on Summit Avenue and people coming in and saying, oh my gosh, like, wow, could you help me? And I just found that design kept coming to me like, Mary, can you pick out our paint colors, or could you help us with arranging our furniture? And it was just something that I would gravitate toward and loved it. And so I think this whole idea of a paint store, I thought, wow, I feel like I should do something with that. Like just threw it out there to my husband and he was like, hey, go for it.
So
and
this is what, your young 20s?
Yeah, I was 24.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, wow, really? I mean, like what? And he was like, I don't know. I don't know design. Just have at it.
Yeah, you're passionate. Go for it.
So we had a building that had been run, a 40-year, paint store on Grand Avenue that did very well and on its own, and had about a 45, 50-foot window on Grand Avenue. And at that time it was kind of it was a tired avenue. It was just starting to turn over a little bit. And so I started with a desk in the window, and I took that 50-foot window and filled it with fabric and wallpaper and color and life and new signage, and just a day at a time and a client at a time attracted clients in the neighborhood and people looking for wallpaper in old Victorian homes on, beautiful Summit Avenue, Crocus Hill, Ramsey Hill, Cathedral Hill. What an incredible place to start. So grateful. I look back and I'm so grateful for the opportunity because it really forged relationships that continue today. It was just an incredible opportunity. And I took it because I loved it and I found passionate about it. And I think people know that about me. And so today, moving through that, realizing that, wow, this is really something I love. But I think that what I also realized in the process is that I really like my clients. I didn't love running a big business. It ended up being where I was taking care of, more like other designers that I had hired and all the other things that come with running a big business. And even hiring people to do those things, I realized that bottom line, I now was 10 years down the road in this store on Grand Avenue, this design store. It was called Grand Interiors, by the way. And I decided that I was going to sell it.
So just to summarize, so how big did it come in terms of employees?
Well, I think at one time we had about 12. So I had a bookkeeper, a manager, we had a paint store that was connected, but I did divide eventually I did divide the store from the paint store to the design. And, it was funny, during those years, paint was not at Lowe's. It wasn't at Home Depot because Home Depot didn't exist. So over the years, the paint business would just linger. It was going away where the design business was really growing. And so that was an interesting thing too, because eventually we just sold the paint business, and then I did sell the design business as well.
Did you find, is it accurate to say that, as you grew, you then were further away from the client and what you enjoyed? Is that what?
I think that's exactly what was happening. Yeah, that's exactly.
Because then you're running your business, right? It's,
right.
We talk a lot about on this podcast, just running a business, and it's, everyone runs it differently. I've, for a long time for myself, it's like, I didn't want to grow big because I thought scaling just, I wasn't interested in it.
Yeah.
And now I'm interested in it for different reasons, because I want to buy back some of my time and, maybe, show up to the client in a different way. And so anyway, we all sort of navigate this at different points of our life and, personal life.
Yeah. And when you start, I was working 9 to 5, 6 days a week. And that was okay with being, I didn't have children, but within that 10, 12-year range of owning that business, I had 3 sons, and I wanted to spend more time with them. And I just wanted more control over my own time. And then I think I realized too, that my passion is really with my client, really running that design business in a much more personal way, as opposed to like a retail store. And the only way I could really do that is if I sold it and moved on and just created a separate business. And I opened a studio down at International Market Square and called Shadow Falls Design. And I have been doing that ever since. And it was a good move for me.
Yeah. How did you, going back, because you're in a unique position, because, sometimes it's fun from an entrepreneurial standpoint, is like, how does someone sell their business? Like, you grew it and you sold it. Looking back now, who did you sell it to? How, would you have navigated that differently today, or walk us through the sale of your company back then?
So I had a fellow interior designer who I actually went to grade school with, who had approached me way back, sort of asking if I wanted a partner. And I thought about it. I thought, didn't really need a partner. I felt like I didn't really want to navigate a partner. And so I decided not to go that direction. And then down the road, I realized when I was ready to leave, I thought I was going to give him a call. And I did give him a call and said, hey, I'm kind of interested in maybe selling this business. Are you interested? And he said, absolutely. And so we actually spent about 8 months with a mediator, somebody who we sort of just talked through, because this ended up being, kind of my baby before I had babies.
Yeah.
And so I was concerned about my clientele that I was leaving on Grand Avenue, that I had, worked so hard to develop, and wanted to make sure that the person I was leaving that business to was going to take care of them the same way that I did, or in a similar manner, obviously. And then I had quite a few employees at that time that I really wanted to make sure that we navigated them together and we were comfortable. And what we ended up doing is he bought the business, and then I stayed on for about 3 years. Because St. Paul is a very, in that neighborhood, it's a very family kind of orientated community. And I wanted to make sure he was coming from the outside of St. Paul, and wanted to make sure that people, felt familiar to him and could kind of meet him and get to know him. And so after about 3 years, I did leave, and then I went down to International Market Square. It's funny though, when I look back, like I've known this man for many, many years, since we were little kids. And we were laughing about, we both had this tendency as young children to love design. Like he would go in and move people's, tchotchkes on their tables and things like that, even as a young man. And I would line up kids in the Minnehaha Parkway area, and they'd pay $0.25, and I'd knock on people's doors and give tours like Jacqueline Kennedy. I mean, I saw her do it. Like, why wouldn't I do it? It's like, it was funny. I mean, that you look back at these little children and what their tendencies are and what their interests are. My parents would go out on a Friday or Saturday night, and I'd move all the furniture in their house. And they'd come back and go, wow, Mary. Yeah, like you were busy.
That's funny.
Yeah. And so funny things like that, kind of, you realize, oh, this is something that has been bubbling in me for a really long time. And I'm just so grateful I found it.
How long did that business exist after you left it?
I really didn't keep track of it, to be honest with you. Today, it's a shoe store.
Okay. Yeah.
So I still live in that neighborhood. Yeah. And it's funny, I missed it. You kind of not mourn it, but there was something really beautiful about watching something like that blossom.
Well, it's kind of nostalgic. You look back and you think this was a beautiful time. You learned a lot. I mean, what were some things that you learned? And what were some hardships that you encountered in that first phase of your career?
Well, I think I learned a lot about myself. At that point, I hadn't run a business before. I'd worked in many different ways. Like, even as like a college student, I did windows for a lot of stores, but they were clothing stores. And how did I ever start to do that? Right. I worked out at the airport and did all their displays. I mean, just, so it was something that really I gravitated toward always. But I realized this whole thing of running a business and being responsible for other people, and I didn't really enjoy it. I just didn't really enjoy it in the same way that I enjoy running a project, taking care of my clients, making sure that that's where my heart is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice that I think we all have to go through different experiences to realize who we are. We talked recently in another podcast where, for me specifically, it was probably 22 to 31. Those were like the years where figuring out who you are, where you're going to live, what you're going to do, who you're going to marry, all those huge life altering decisions. But a lot of it is just figuring out who you are, who's Mary, who's Mark. I think the nice part about someone was lamenting the other day that they were middle age. I'm like, I love middle age. Like, I know who I am. I know what my purpose is. Like, having clarity of purpose is, and not that sometimes it doesn't have to be age dependent. I mean, you could struggle your whole life to find out who you are, what you are. And you could also find out very early. And you just mentioned as a young girl looking back, it's only through the hindsight that you realized, hey, I had a talent and a knack for this early on.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes you, I'm sure like with your kids, did that lesson sort of pass on as you sort of looked at your kids as a parent and sort of empower them and say, hey, I think this is something that you're probably going to be really interested in? Or did that not, or were they already older before that sort of dawned on you?
I don't know that about my kids. I think another thing too, during that age of 23, my parents died when I was 20 and 23 years old. So as I look back at a young woman, I was grieving very terribly at that age of my life. And I feel like that business was healing. It was like I was planting seeds during that time. And I feel like it was so healing to me to be able to think of somebody other than myself and maybe my own sadnesses, and just to give back to my community. It just felt so healing that honestly, by the time I sold that business, I think that I had put a lot of that to rest. I mean, it's never gone, that kind of grief of losing your parents when you're so young, but it also was, I just look at it as such an incredible gift.
I think one of the things, like if I was to describe you, just because I've known you for so long,
Yeah.
is you prioritize other people in the way that you show up for other people and care about other people. But one thing, it's a simple thing, but I know, like for instance, I know that next week I will get a card in the mail from you that's handwritten because it's one of literally your signature.
Yeah.
And I know it might sound like a simple thing to people that don't do it. I guess I'd ask the audience this: when was the last time you got a handwritten thank you card?
Yeah.
And what did it say on it? What was the intention behind it? And I feel like you're definitely an old soul in the sense of like you like to connect to people on a very deep personal level. Even about, we'll talk a little bit, we can talk about it now and a little bit about, even like your brand, like the clientele that you gravitate towards. I feel like you are uniquely suited to that because you are all integrity and class and just you just have a high degree of, I'm struggling with the word here, but just like you really want people to know that you care about your interactions with them. And it shows up in your design and it shows up with how you conduct yourself as a businesswoman. And so it's just really interesting. I only share that because obviously the audience wouldn't know that about the letters. At what point did you model that after someone, or at what point was that kind of your calling card that you would do that so often? Did that even develop in the store? I'm thinking of you writing thank you letters to the people that came in to buy paint.
That's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it actually started is all the thank you notes writing for your wedding. Like I had never had to write so many thank you notes, and to come up with creative ways of saying that. I think it mattered to me that each person felt like their gift mattered to me, because it did. But I really made it like a full-time job. It was stressful.
You're like, I had to come up with a job so I could keep writing notes.
Somebody said to me, I think you should just write 2 or 3 notes that are really good and then just put the name in. I said, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But I think that, yes, people would come into the paint store, and that was kind of my way of marketing myself. I didn't have any big budget. We were really young and we were scrappy and my husband and I are both working hard to build a life together. And so that was a way for me to let somebody know that I appreciated them coming in, stopping in, And I think you remember that. It's just like, thank you. I appreciate you stopping in. That was great. I come back if you need something else. I still do that today. You're right.
Yeah.
It is my marketing. I'm not on Instagram with anything. I don't share client pictures, client information. A lot of times people say, oh, who are you working with? And I'm like, I don't share that. I feel like my clients know that. I usually tell that really upfront. You can talk about me as much as you want, or your project, or anything that you want, but I won't. And I found out really early, especially I think in St. Paul, and maybe other cities are like this, but it's very sisters, brothers, aunts and uncles, everybody's kind of related. And I just never wanted anyone to ever feel like there was any kind of gap in my privacy for them, my respect really for their privacy.
When it comes to quality, craftsmanship, and performance, Pella sets the standard. Whether you're building custom homes or designing a timeless space, Pella offers innovative window and door solutions that blend beauty and efficiency. With showrooms and experts around the country, Pella makes it easy to find the perfect fit for your next project and their team to support it. Build with confidence, build with Pella. Visit Pella.com to explore products and connect with your local rep today. For more information, you can listen to episode 1 or listen to episode 109, where we bring on Pella owners and founders at Pella Northland, as well as their innovative team behind the Steady Set innovation. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. If you're still chasing checks and juggling spreadsheets, it's time to upgrade. Adaptive is revolutionizing how builders get paid with AI-powered bill pay, automated draws, one-click payments, and built-in lien waivers. Faster payments, fewer headaches, and total visibility. Adaptive takes care of the back-end chaos so you can focus on what you do best, building. We've used Adaptive for 2.5 years and trust them to keep our projects moving and payments flowing. Learn more at adaptive.build and simplify the pay process today. For more information, you can also listen to episode 10 and episode 15. So when did you discover that? Because I'd like to talk a little, I think this is you and I have been talking offline about how you promote yourself, or how you, when our clients interview you, like where can they go to see either some of your work, and we've kind of, it's your decision, but I love the idea that it's essentially, the other day I named, in my opinion, the top 4 or 5 builders. And one of the builders has such a low profile, no one knows who they are, but all the architects know.
And I knew.
And you knew who they were. You knew exactly who they were.
Did.
And this is where the conversation started. And it was like, there is, and I know I'm on the other side of this, but like the point, there's a path forward for everyone. And for some, it's like document everything, show everything. And our world seems to like that, and that's fine. And if you like to do that, do it. But know that, like, if you don't like to do that, there are other ways.
Right.
And one of the things I'm so interested to talk to you more about is, when did you realize that privacy and sort of not exclusivity, because you're not an exclusive person in the sense that like you don't exclude anybody, because I think people sometimes think by being private you're excluding people, but that's not it at all. It's you are just like, you want them to know that you're, well, in your words, explain, I would love, and rather than me guess, why is it that you gravitated towards that? And looking back now, how would you sort of articulate that message?
I think the road to that was just respect. Honestly, I mean, when I really look back, it's like I was a young girl. I didn't, have those kinds of boundaries at that age of my life. But as I invested in myself and invested in my business, I realized that these were things that I valued. And so it was really from my values and my respect for my clients, my respect for myself, because I'm a private person in a lot of ways. And other ways I'm not at all, but I want to respect that in other people. And so that's how it started. And then I just kind of drew a line around it. And occasionally somebody will say, oh, I heard you're working with so-and-so, obviously they told you, and I'll say, yeah, I mean, I don't make it like it, it's.
You don't say something like, no, I can neither confirm nor deny that allegation. You've been served. Let me get my lawyer on the line here. There's a cease and desist order here, people.
But I just try, I said, I just try.
Well, I love leaning into that. I mean, I think it is who you are, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And you have some, very high-end clients, and I would imagine that they respect their privacy.
Right. But I never wanted to feel like I was like an elephant hunter either. It's not like I started in a paint store. So let's get real.
Yeah.
Right. And so, people would say to me, why are you working in a paint store? And it was like, I wanted to start at that space. I wanted to build on something that was grounded. that was seeded, that was built on, like day by day, week by week. 43 years later, it went by so quickly, but I feel like I am rooted deeply and rooted in my community and respect for the people that I work for and my family. And I also want to honor my family and make sure that I'm the best I can be out there for them as well as for me. So that's kind of that's how I got there.
When you moved to IMS under Shadow Falls, how did you pick the name Shadow Falls Design?
Oh my gosh. I went around and around about different Grand Interiors was so easy because I was on Grand Avenue, right? But like, how do you find a name? And I didn't necessarily want it to be in my name. Someone had told me that it's really best not to have your name as your business. And I'm like, okay. I took that. I don't even know why, but so my husband and I kind of were going over names, and we lived in a neighborhood in St. Paul called Shadow Falls. And it's just a great little neighborhood by St. Thomas University. And I thought, Shadow Falls. Yeah, it sounded good to me. And so there you are.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. We had a couple on a couple years ago, Clark and Aldine, and that is the streets of their home addresses are like where they met. So their names are Michael and Danielle, but like everyone asks, like Clark and Aldine, what is it? And I just like that I love a story behind the naming convention. Nobody gave me that advice, by the way. Mark D. Williams Custom Homes. Blah. I was like, it's the worst name ever.
You are out there.
Probably because Dad was David A. Williams Construction, right? So you model it after what you know. But we actually went through a branding exercise trying to figure out if we could rename it. But just because you rename it doesn't make it something different.
Right.
And so at that point, after 20 years, you're kind of like, well, this is what it is.
Yeah. I've had a couple marketing people come to me too. Can't we change that?
Nah.
I'm way down the road. I'm way down the road with that.
Yeah, we're good. We're good with this one. So how many of the clients followed you from St. Paul to IMS? Did you have a non-compete clause, or was that not really a thing? Or
I didn't. I didn't. He went on and built his career and still is a designer today. And I went on with my clients and the people who followed me.
Okay,
and so it just was never an issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is
never
great.
An issue at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I admire about you, and having seen you interact with a few clients, but we were just talking, so you're part of our Curious Design Collective. And you had mentioned before we came up here that, let's say the average age is definitely below, let's say 45, 50, right? Below 50. And tell the story. You had shared, what was the conflict that came up? And then you were asked.
So we were in a collective a couple of weeks ago, and by far, most of the women in the group, men and women, were under the age of 45, I would say. I'm 70 years old. Mm-hmm. And I was there because I am curious, like you are, super curious about how people are running the businesses today, what we're talking about, all the different topics that come up in your collective, which I absolutely have loved and will continue to be part of. But it was clear that I was definitely the oldest girl in the room, and so everyone kind of shared their different marketing paths and what they were doing. And it's very planned today. And they talked a lot about social media, how they are in social media, all the different marketing people that they've hired, that they only do jobs that are over $1 million. And I really just sat there and listened. Wow, this is so different than how I started 43 years ago, right? It just was so different, but listened really intently on kind of how everyone was navigating, fascinated to it. And then they came to me and they go, Mary, so how do you market? Oh, wow. I said, well, word of mouth. And they kind of looked at me blankly and what? Word of mouth. And I said, well, I've worked for 43 years and word of mouth to me is just like it's always worked for me. I don't have a social presence and I don't have a website, although I'm working on one. And I said, my clients have really encouraged me to have a website because they would like to tell their friends or show their house. So I said, I'm conflicted by that because I really respect people's privacy and don't want to say, oh, that's so-and-so's house or that's so-and-so's house. But people don't seem to be as concerned about it as I am. So I said, that's something I'm leaning into. So I told them a story about a project I had done in the last couple of years. I did a whole condominium building in, public areas. And one day a man followed me out to my car and he said, hey, you do not have a website. Like, who hired you? And I said, hi, I'm Mary. You obviously know I'm working
on the
building.
Website police here? Yeah. This guy sounds highly aggressive.
Yeah, he was. And I had just finished the whole project. And I think he had come into the condominium association late. And so I understood he just wanted some information. So I said, hey, what can I tell you? What do you want to know about me? And he said, why don't you have a website? And I said, to be honest with you, I've been in the business for 42 years and it's kind of working for me. And he just looked at me, he goes, what? Like, where did you come from? And so I said, if you want to see photos or, really you've seen my work, but if you have any questions or you're concerned or you need something, I'm here. You have my number. So we moved on from that, but it was a funny moment because it was like, yeah, people are looking at this differently today. And I need to acknowledge that and maybe lean into it a little bit more. And that's one of the reasons I've been coming to the collective to okay, let's get present here. Let's see what's going on in the market that I'm unaware of. And how can I grow and change? I'm not retiring.
Yeah. And I think there is you mentioned that you're a private person. I'm the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm one of the least private people I know.
Yeah.
And I think you just play to who you are, right? It's being authentic. It's showing up how you don't have, it's not hard for me to do video. People ask me sometimes, like, how do you do all the video? Like, it's fun. I enjoy it. It's passion. It's whatever. It's just, I don't have the filter. So you just are what you are. And I think you just, whoever you are, whatever your personality type is, like, do you. Yeah. Like, because there's a place for everybody and there's clientele for everyone. I'm sure there are clients that have not worked with me because I'm likely too
out there.
Yeah, too out there. Mm-hmm. And I have in our contract, like a lot of those that do a lot of social media or video, like we have the right to photography our home or videography our home or document it. And that's part of marketing. How did you find us, Mr. Client or Mrs. Client, if you didn't do it that way? And I've only ever had it happen, be an issue once. And we work through it. And because I don't want my client to feel uncomfortable.
No.
It is hard for me to relate, however, to someone who is super private because I'm not. Now I can respect their decision.
Yeah.
But to say that I truly understand it, to a certain level, obviously I can, but to some level I can't. Anyway, so I guess it's probably trying to meet people on their terms because there are some people that are like, oh, I love seeing the house being published or so there's, I think your vibe attracts your tribe. I think people that are, birds of a feather flock together. There's all these analogies of like people that come together. I'm just curious, like, have you had jobs that you've won because you are private and because people know that their privacy is sort of protected?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
But
then I think of you and I working together, like we've worked together so well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you brought me in on a huge project many years ago and we really, it was through COVID.
Yeah, that was a wild project.
We really did it. Like we were on it every day together for 3 years.
Yeah, that house was beautiful. You know what? Yeah. So what's interesting, because you and I have known each other for a long time. We had a cabin in Montana on Glacier Park for 20 some years, 25 years. And one of the favorite things that I remember as I became older, from a teen into a young man, was, my mom, who wasn't a designer or who was a designer, had you come out. Because sometimes we see things all the time, even designers and builders in their own space sometimes need a refresh. And you came in and sort of remodeled the main level in terms of stylistic. And we were just talking about before you came on, like my dad and I loved, the twin benches. Like I can still see it in my mind what it looked like. Right. And the home that we're talking about was a home where it was a very, the client wanted a home that was very much like, Jackson Hole, that kind of thing. And so I'm like, I know the perfect person. And it's Mary, because she did it for our personal cabin. Plus, I'd never worked with you before. So I'm like, this is going to be great. Yeah. And it was, I'm so proud of the home that we built together. Incredible home.
It was so incredible.
And, you look at no one could have forecast that was happening during COVID. So we had to navigate. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned over my career is when you align yourself with people that are in alignment with, let's find solutions, not problems. Let's get things done. Yeah. And people you just generally like being around. Yeah. Like the rest of it, you can kind of figure out.
Right.
And I think one of the things I love about my job as a builder is as I get to interview different designers and architects, like not every one designer or one architect or one builder is the right for every one person. Mm-hmm. Like this mixture of the team has to be right for everyone involved, frankly. Yeah. And we all have different parts to play. And one of the things that I love is competence, and you ooze competence. And especially in, that particular home, there was a lot of difficult, challenging things that happened. Mm-hmm. And
we didn't have an architect.
We didn't.
No. Yeah. And so you and I,
we pretty much designed it.
We did.
And that was,
we trusted each other. There was this incredible trust that we had. Right. And you'd say, what do you think? And I'd say, Mark, hey, we need to do this. And it was like, there were no questions. There was just flexibility. There was we always wanted the best for our client. And you and I both that's where we were coming from. We wanted the best product.
I look back at like our career, my career,
Yeah.
and I look at, and that wasn't that many years ago, right? It's only 5 years ago,
Right.
but how much I've changed in terms of like who I work with. And, someone asked me the other day, like, because there are a number of different skill sets. You can have a draftsperson, a home designer, an architect.
Yeah.
You can have a classically designed, interior design. I mean, there's so many different skill levels in these talents, right? And it's still assembling the right team. And that particular team was the right team for that client and what their budget was and what they wanted, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
But looking back, like you and I had to do the job. Like it would have been really nice to have an architect because all that plan was like 6 pages.
They didn't want one though. Remember?
I know.
They were like, "Oh no, we're good with you too," and we're like,
and we can, we know we can do it. And I think
this
is kind of this interesting paradigm because, I mean, you can always critique your own work. It's like, well, okay, could the home have been to a higher level of whatever? Sure, would it cost however much more money to do it? At the end of the day, if you are missing a key component, then the other people have to double their workload, right? Like you did some huge lifting on the design side. I did a bunch. We had to figure out a ton of stuff,
right.
And it's already hard enough building a home. I give her credit. Do you know Linda Engler at all?
Yes, of course.
She had this greatest line. It's one of my new favorite lines. She said she wants the whole team to be aligned. She said, I want the designer, the builder, the client, and the architect on one team, and the project is the opponent. Like basically the project is always going to fight you. So let's not fight each other.
Right.
Let's be unified so that when the project says, I'm rearing my head and I want to fight, we as a team can say, we've got this.
Yeah. Wow.
Anyway, I love that. I love that quote of like how to align as a team.
Yeah. It's good. So. And we were aligned.
Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
You and I were. And the rest you'll have to pay a subscription fee for the rest of that story. Oh boy. Yeah. So to present day. So yeah, one of the things that I was going to bring up, because I don't know that much about, at what point did because you and your husband have the French fry stands down at the, tell me about that. Like, when did that come about?
Okay. So my husband has been in the French fry business for 52 years.
Really?
Yeah. He was in college, I think, when he started it. It's kind of a long little story about they lived out in Washington, D.C. and had seen there's a French fry stand on the Maryland shore and thought they'd bring it back to Minnesota and try it out. And they started with donuts first and brought donuts to Maryland, but it didn't fly. And so anyway, they ended up doing French fries, and it's just been a great thing for us. I really had never been to the French fry stand before we were married. And so the first year.
Was that something that he started or his family started?
He and his brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old were they when they started?
I think they were like 20, something like that.
Okay, so
yeah.
And I actually don't. Does he have another job too?
Yes, he's a real estate developer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, because I kind of like this French fry baron. I love this story that it's like, I mean, it's just an amazing business. I would be curious, what lessons have you learned from running that business that you've been able to apply to Shadow Falls?
Well, I'm not so involved in that business because, it started out with, two brothers owning it together. So I just respected that relationship. And over the years, my husband has taken over the business for probably the last 10, 12 years, something like that. But what have I learned from it? Well, it's been an incredible gift for my children. I have to say, you don't really get to go to work with your dad as a developer. They don't get to go to work with their dad and see what he's doing or building. But they do work with them 12 days every year at the fair. And I think what they've learned is just, again, I think he treats people really respectfully and equally. I feel like he runs a really clean, good business. He really takes care of the people around him. He really cares about the product and the consistency of the product. And I think it's something when you go to the French fry stand every year at the fair, you're going to get the same really good quality product. And that's a really big deal.
It's funny because I don't actually, just from a health standpoint, I try to stay away from fried foods, but every year we go and we get a huge bucket, and my wife included, and everyone has their little sauce, right? I do the vinegar on it, and the kids all have it. They're hot. We always forget how hot they are right away. But they're so good.
Yeah, it's like a family business. Yeah. It's really, we have about 100 to 120 employees every year, so they're there for 12 days. And we have a big party at the end of the year for them, and there's a king and a queen, and it's just it's a wonderful environment that he's created out there. I'm incredibly proud of him. I'm really proud of my boys that are, our sons are now out there with him running it. And my grandchildren now
That's
are
pretty cool.
selling. My granddaughter said, okay, my goal this year is to have my own window. It was like, woohoo, good for you. So that's, you just don't know these things you put your heart in, and, they don't always work. We've had a lot of things in our lives that have not worked, that we put a lot of love and energy in, but we've been very fortunate and grateful for the things that have worked and that we've worked hard. Someone said to me, Mary, like showing up, good things happen. And I think it's just such a simple way, but showing up, just show up and good things happen.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly. You'd mentioned we're actually going to be doing a series. I like this idea, and it's not like I created it, but I think failure is a part of success.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, I think failure and success are not binary. They're not black and white. I think there's definitely different shades of what they are.
Right.
And I think, sometimes I think we give probably too much credit and adulation to success, and we probably demean failure too often.
Right.
Because I think they both have their place and both are learning. You had mentioned failure. Do you have any things that failed or interactions that went really poorly that you can think of that sort of informed, like even now, like things that like sort of almost like a bedrock of like, hey, this didn't go well. Now 20 years later, I'm thinking like, you know what? This is why I do this, because I learned it here.
Right. I have one, if I really thought about it, I have one that just stands out so clearly. When I owned that paint store and I just started a business, there was a client who invested, just like we've talked about. Some people just invest in you. Like she just absolutely believed in me. And so anyway, they had built a new house and I had selected furnishings and furniture and so forth. And it was all coming just before Christmas. So 3 days before Christmas Eve, her sofa showed up at her house on a truck, and they had upholstered it inside out. It's the most, like, I still can't get my head around it.
Wow, that's
No, one side was blue and pink check, and the outside was gauze. And whoever upholstered it thought that the pink and blue should go on the inside. I just couldn't get my head around it.
That is pretty wild.
So she called me and she goes, hey, they're here and they're delivering a kind of gauze colored sofa and it's not mine. And I said, put the sofa back on the truck and tell them to come to me. So she did, and they came back, and I said, you guys, this is inside out. The fabric is the other side. So this upholstery company, I said, I need it before Christmas. We had 2 days away. They hand stitched, took off every stitch and turned it over and hand stitched it and put it back. It lasted for 25 years. And she came.
And they turned around in 2 days?
2 days, and they delivered it with a plant from me with the back on the truck. And she looked at me and she was like, I was so profusely, like so embarrassed, that it had happened. And she looked at me and she said, Mary, it is not a nuclear war. It is a sofa. Let go of it. Yeah. And it was such a good moment for me because it was overwhelming to me at that moment that I was going to make a mistake like that. And I mean, obviously it was out of my control, but it was also, it paved the way for me to realize, to put it in perspective. This is furniture. This is not, I mean, I care about it. I can do what I can about it, and I do everything I can about it. But then I need to let go.
Right.
And I've learned that. I really am good at it.
This episode of The Curious Builder is brought to you by Olive & Vine Socials. If you're a builder, a designer, or an architect looking to grow your brand without dancing on TikTok or spending your whole life on social media, listen up. Olive & Vine Socials specializes in Pinterest marketing, blogging, and email strategy for luxury home brands. They help you turn your beautiful work into a strategic SEO-driven content that drives real traffic and connects you with your ideal clients without burning you out. Ready to grow smarter and not harder? Visit oliveandvinesocials.com and tell them the Curious Builder sent you. Just so you know, I've been working with Alyssa over at Olive & Vine for 3 years. She helped us launch the podcast. She's helped us grow our brand at Mark Williams Custom Homes. I could not do what I've done without her help. And I'm more than happy to announce that she's our latest sponsor for the Curious Builder podcast.
If there's a problem, I can go to plan B. I can go to Z really quickly. I'm very, very nimble in that way. And I know I'm a really good problem solver. So, like how I ended up in this business, it's where my skills are. They aren't everywhere, believe me. And I know where they are. I know where the gaps are. And then I hire people to support me in those ways, like accounting, bookkeeping.
Mhm.
I have an assistant who's wonderful. Yeah, I'm so grateful for all those people because they let me do what I get to do best.
Well, I think that's, identifying your ideal client, but it's also like identifying the things that A, you want to do, and B, you're good at.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we think we have to be good at things we're just not good at.
Yeah.
But they like rob our creativity, or they rob our
Right.
energy.
Yeah.
There are certain things for me that they just absolutely cripple it. Sometimes
they just drag you down.
Yeah.
It's like they're heavy, they're weighty. And
Yeah.
so, I've moved on from that. And I feel like so much, I learned so much in that. And then, the cool part, that client is still like, she's my oldest client.
Is she really?
And she'll go, don't say that. Because I'll say, hey, this is my oldest client. And she's like, don't say that. I'm not your oldest client.
You should be like, do you guys ever reference the couch that was inside out?
We laughed about it.
Because that is amazing. I mean, to your point, like, how does that ever even happen?
Like, just can't get my head around it.
Like, I get like April 1st.
Right.
Like, totally makes sense if it happened on April 1st. But like 2 days before Christmas.
And that they turned it around. Like, they really, that's a thing I think that I've really forged and really worked on relationships with my vendors. Like, I vet everybody. Nobody goes into a client of mine's house unless they have been in my house or in my office or somewhere where I have vetted them and I know that they're safe, they're good, they care about what they do, they have my values, they understand my quality and what I'm expecting. So, I mean, it's like that to me, like that day when that guy, he was like, I'll have it in 2 days. I'm like, okay. And it was like, he pulled up in a truck. I jumped on with a plant and we went out and delivered
went
it
together. That's funny. Actually, I was going to ask you that because I sort of agree with you. I tend to, well, let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Sometimes people aren't the right tool for the right job. So you have these dependable vendors that you use. Sometimes they're turnover, sometimes they sell their business, sometimes they go out of business, sometimes you need a new partner. What is your vetting process? You mentioned like they might work on your personal home in a smaller capacity, or you start them as a smaller job. Where I'm coming at this is I get a lot of requests from a lot of trade partners that want to be on quote our bid list. And we need a couple, but I don't need 10 because honestly, it's a disservice to all of them. I don't want to waste people's time, and I'm fine with getting a bid. At the end of the day, a bid is a bid. Like, I need a relationship.
Right.
Like, I need to know also on the clientele's homes the strata that we're working on. It's like, I can't, in fact, usually the low number I have to throw away because it's like, no, I know that this number's off.
Right.
It's like you throw away the high, you throw away the low, and you've got a couple in the middle, and you're like, okay, now it's relationships. And how do I know? It's of course easier to go into battle with someone that you've worked with before, of course,
Right.
but their companies evolve too. I mean,
Right.
there's people, we had plenty of issues. I mean, painting companies and whatever. I mean, it's always painting. Poor painters and drywall, man. Can you build a house without drywall and painting? Man, it sure would be nice. Anyway, how have you vetted? You said you go vet them, but what is the vetting process?
Well, initially my vetting was through the paint store, right? Because the men behind the counter, mixing up those paints every day by hand. It was not by machine then. It was like a little dip of this and a little dip of that. And I learned a ton from those men. I think they saw that young girl coming in and putting in a desk and they were like, oh, she's not going to last long. And I thought, I'll show you. I'll be around, and we really grew to have a lot of respect for each other. And I learned a ton from those two guys at that paint store. Right. So that was my initial vetting, wallpaper and paint from them, and really, built a really nice, group of workmen, people that could help me. And then once I moved down to IMS, I think we share with each other, like, the designers down there, like, I have a lot of people come and say, hey, Mary, who are you using for this? Or, hey, Mary. And I think because I really am really careful and they know that.
Yep.
And so, and I'm more than willing to share that, more power to us all. Right.
I think a big part is ask.
Yeah.
I think today, of course, with internet and just you can research whatever or find most. Yeah. And you can call me. You can call Mark Williams. Mark Williams can hook you up with Mary Wozniak. But, I think I love it when people ask. You know, I had a situation the other day where I needed something solved. And I called this builder. I'm not big friends with them, but I knew they worked with this person. I'm like, hey, this is Mark. I'm just curious. And they gave me, they kept talking and talking, and they gave you way more than you would think. And I think people just don't ask for help enough.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's something.
Yeah. I'm more than willing to share any ideas or anything like that. It's kind of what I've loved about being at IMS is it's really just an incredible community of women and men who love and have passion like I do, and to be surrounded by that every day and walk in that beautiful building and have my office with my other associates is just, you know.
It's a pretty special building for those that aren't from Minnesota. So I'll let you describe it. How would you describe, I mean, International Market Square?
It was originally the Munsingware building where it was a factory, right? And then I'm trying to think of what year it was renovated. It was, you know, probably 40 years ago it was renovated. And at that time it was so, wow, that's going to be a design center. And everyone was very... It's
pretty forward thinking.
It was.
Who created that concept?
I don't know. I really don't.
So would have been
a small design center downtown Minneapolis that we would go to called Harmon Court, like way back in the 80s, early 80s. I'm so dating myself here, and then we would have to just go from different building to building and walk around. Well, you know, once we just it could be in one building. It's incredible to have us all in one building.
So again, you've got designers, you've got architects, you've got
lighting. I have lighting, flooring, carpeting, window treatments, cleaning people, every kind of resource really that we need in design. There are people obviously who maybe are not in our building that we use as well, but the building itself is really just a little treasure trove.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Why do you think there are a handful of builders in there? Why haven't more builders historically officed out of there?
I think it's expensive.
Yeah.
I really, when it comes down to it, I think, how smart to be in a building where all the designers and architects are, right?
Right.
So I think it's just a matter of the lease and the expense of being in downtown Minneapolis. And, you know, we have our own parking. It's really, really great parking. You can come in and out of downtown Minneapolis really easily there. The location is fabulous. And we have a beautiful restaurant. You know, D'Amico restaurant is in the middle of our building. The building is stunning. There's just we just got a salon. I walked down the hall the other day. I'm like, is that a salon?
Yeah, I saw that on the main floor. Yeah.
So you just never know. Yoga studios. There's a massage girl down the hall. We have a dermatologist on second floor.
That's funny. I mean, I guess I could see it from a building standpoint.
Yeah.
Not all builders, but a lot of builders, space for materials and job signs and you know, construction related items would be pretty hard in a building like that.
Yeah, unless you're on the first floor.
Right.
Yeah,
and a lot of space.
Right. Right.
Which to your back. Now, I guess that you helped illustrate why. I mean, it's a good marketing move.
Right.
To be down there from all the relationship standpoint. I enjoyed it. You know, I go down there now more, probably half as the curious builder and now half for my normal job.
So you're looking for resources or?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is, there's a couple architects that it seems like, you know, we've gotten a fair amount of work with that they're located in IMS. So, you know, we're going there with our clients. So, you know, and it's also very client forward. So why wouldn't you want to, it kind of gives them a little bit of a show, right? You walk in, you're like, wow, this is an impressive building. So there is a part of the art of show and the sales that I like in terms of bringing clients for the first time.
Right.
I feel like that particular architect has a bit of an advantage, you know, more subtle probably. It's not probably overt because I'm like, wow, this is really nice, you know? So anyway, it's a beautiful community.
Yeah.
And so,
it can be overwhelming. I know sometimes for my clients. So, you know, I try to kind of preset the day if I'm taking them to places to look at fabrics or to look at lighting, or usually really an hour and a half is about it. And they'll say, kind of done, Mary, let's do it another day, and we'll do it in sessions. Yeah. You know, I think you've been with me before when we've done that. It works really well. You know, like, let's look at flooring today. Let's look at lighting next week.
Well, and clients are so different, right? Because some would like to come in and kind of do their own hunting and gathering by themselves.
Exactly.
And some of them are by appointment only. Some of them. So it's like, it is sort of interesting. I find that the best builds and the best relationships are the ones where they empower the people they've hired, shockingly, to do their job.
Right.
You know, and you know, we are in the service industry. I think we sometimes forget that. And I think our industry in general could do a much better job at hospitality, mainly because none of us are trained that way. You know, I think of hotels and restaurants, and the art of the service is part of the meal. I mean, you think of your favorite restaurants, part of what you like, of course, the food, but it's the ambiance, it's the service. I mean,
you know, I just did something. This is just a thought you just brought up, but I have a young couple I'm working with right now. They're in their early 30s and they can't meet with me until 5:30, right? Because they both work. And I was at a grocery store picking up something for my family, and I thought, God, those guys are going to be starving. So I got cheese and crackers, and then the liquor store was next door, and I walked over there, and I thought, hey, what's like a really good, mixture thing here? And so he gave me a couple ideas, and I brought him in a bag, and I walked in, and I said, you guys, I know you're probably starving. We have a lot to go over tonight, but hey, here you go. And they were like, woohoo.
Yeah.
It was like they poured drinks. We all sat and had cheese and crackers. And even when I left, he looked at me and goes, hey, where did you get that stuff again?
Yeah.
And I said,
was it Surdyk's or where did you go?
No, I was at Kowalski's.
Oh, Kowalski's.
Yeah. And they were really some kind of a really kind of crafted mixed drink. And I just, bought a couple of them and thought, let's try it.
But that's hospitality. You cared. That's thoughtfulness.
Yeah. I was just thinking, God, they're going to be so tired sitting there at 5:30 looking at fabric and rugs. Oh,
How often do your clients meet sort of after hours?
Not that often, to be honest with you, because I'm at an age where people are retired, and a lot of times now we're doing second homes or they're downscaling, and I'm doing things all over the country.
Yeah.
This is a young couple that, are working full time and renovating a really beautiful home in St. Paul. And so, I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to be so tired.
Yeah.
So, what might help this? Well, in my family, like food and drink, right? Yeah, it's going to help a lot. So, and it did. The night went well and it was fun. And I'm for sure we'll do it again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nobody wants a hangry builder, designer, or client.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, even like your job site walks, right? I mean, the coldest ones are, I don't know why. It always seems like there's an electrical walkthrough in January or February.
Mark, you and I did one. I mean, it was 40 below. And we were in the basement of a house and we had heaters around.
That's right. I forgot. Yeah, that was, so we had the temporary heaters. We'd go down there to warm up our toes.
And we were looking at marble, which was also cold.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard. I mean, you've got to meet clients kind of where they're at, right? I mean, that particular had a young family, a lot of responsibilities.
Yeah.
As I recall, did they ever come down or we always brought stuff to them, as I recall?
We always brought things to them. I think I had them at IMS one time.
For the initial meeting, probably.
No, it was for appliances.
Okay.
Yeah. But other than that, I brought everything to them.
I've had, come to think of it, we're recording this in our office and someone was just in here recently and gave me some design tips on the feng shui. I had some dead flowers and anyway, Billy was like, hey, if you have a dead flower, that's bad. It's like, I don't know anything about it. Like those flowers have been there for 4 years. They were like some like stick fern thingies. Anyway, where I'm going with this is like, I have a lot of clients that have actually never been to my office.
Yeah.
Or they come to my office once.
Right.
I think sometimes as builders, I mean, and maybe it's a vanity thing or ego thing, like I would like to have a nicer office or a bigger office or a more swanky office or whatever you're in your mind is like what that is.
Right.
But the truth of it is, they don't.
No.
And like a lot of my remodel clients specifically, like we're meeting at their home because if we're going to meet with the architect and the designer, it makes sense. They're in their space.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't we be in the space? It's way easier to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I'm just kind of amazed at how infrequently people are actually at our office.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you find that true for yourself or do you find that you do have clients come to your office quite a bit? I think
they love to come down to IMS. That's what I have found. I'll say, here are some fabrics, but you're really more than welcome to come down someday. And they go, oh, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
And so I will, again, kind of pre-select areas that I think that they would really enjoy. And then I bring them to those areas and then we, we'll go through. I usually do take them to my office and maybe I'll have a cup of coffee or something like that and go over their selections. But, usually once or twice is enough. Unless they're kind of diggers. There are people that like, hey, I want to get my hands on it. I want to feel it. And I'm like that myself. So I'm like, have at it.
Yeah, totally.
Like I'll dig any day with you. I mean, I get lost in those fabric rooms. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, Mary, it's 5:00. We'd like to go home.
Yeah. Like there's no snacks in the fabric drawer.
Right. I know. So, but I love the process. And I think more than anything, I think they'll say, what's your superpower? To me, it's like, I love the job. I love what I do. And I love the process and I trust it. So, I think that's, when you walk into a room and you have that kind of feeling about something, it resonates to all of us. I don't get down about it when things go wrong. I just find the next solution. And usually my clients will move with me. Occasionally they won't. They'll go, no, I'm disappointed by that. Okay. And I'm always kind of like, oh, okay. Because I would just go to plan B. It was like and what I found is that when I find that there is something, we talked about this, when you find like you have a wall and you can't quite get around it, it's like there's a reason for that wall. I can find something else, and usually it's a better solution. I mean, that's trusting the process.
I think you are really good at knowing yourself.
Yeah.
And, I've spoken a lot, not that I have the answer, but I just think all of us need to spend more time thinking about our ideal client. Mm-hmm. And I'm blanking. You had a story recently that you shared where you were on an interview, and I think it wasn't going to work between you and one of the other partners.
Right.
And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was the homeowner, you knew them and they brought you in and you said, you know what, I think you're best served if I'm not on this project.
Right.
That takes amazing self-awareness, but it set everybody up for success, even if it wasn't a financial success. Yeah. I would even argue that it is a financial success because the amount of time that it would have taken and not everything is measured in dollar amount.
Right.
And actually you probably could. You would also say like, look at how much time that this took, or guess what? They'll respect you for other work because you really stood by your values. Yeah. I know I would be like, I heard that story and be like, even though, and I would maybe tell my friends about it.
Well, it was
and you
hard.
Didn't make it for that reason,
no.
But you did it because it was the right thing to do.
It really was. It was really hard for me because I really liked the client, and it was a really, really beautiful project. I mean, it was a really wonderful project in all ways, quality, people, but for many reasons, there were things that were apparent to me that I couldn't work with. And so I just explained it to my client and just said, I think you're better off maybe finding another designer. And she's like, really? And sort of explained it a little bit more, just because I wanted them to really feel comfortable of why I was doing it. And then eventually she did call me back and just said, I'm so sorry. I really should have done a little bit more looking at what the team was like. And she said, I'm sorry it didn't work. And I am too, but I still see her, and, I'm so happy their project is going forward and is beautiful. But for me, it wasn't right. Yeah. And you're right. I do know that about myself. When I get that feeling, it was like, I need to listen to myself, and I do, because I don't want to, like you said, waste somebody's time. Yeah.
When you look at the design, build, or architect community now, and looking back at your 40 years, what do you see going forward? What are some observations you have about the current crop of interior designers and our field? And just contrast with your own career. What do you see as the future of the industry?
Well, I think there's a great future in our industry, and all these incredibly creative women I see around me. I'm, inspired by them and just cheer them on. And I feel like I'm always there to mentor them. Like I mentor a lot of young women if they're in school or out of school, or they come in for an interview, or they're looking for an assistant job. I always put everything down and just sit down and talk to them, because it's like, I know what it's like to be that. And it's nice to have somebody care. And I don't know if my little nuggets make a difference or not, but, I would like to share them. As far as the industry goes, I think we have an amazing industry. I think our partners are all fabulous. So many different things. We're a worldwide now collective. I mean, my goodness. Before it was like I was flying to New York or Chicago for fabrics. I mean, I was just in Paris at the Paris Deco and met all the world designers in January. Pierre Frey and Trisha Guild, all these different people went with a group of women from the Twin Cities, and we were sponsored by Holly Hunt and by AJ Masson and all these wonderful vendors we have. We're moving forward. As far as like the internet and all that social media goes, I don't think I still really understand it the way that they will, because I didn't grow up with it. And so as far as I'm concerned, like, I will continue to lean into it. I will, and to learn about it. But for me, like I told that young man or that man, it's working for me.
Yeah.
And I think I'm comfortable there.
Yeah.
So
well, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming in today. It was, I love talking with you, and obviously I get to see you more than many of the guests and just in general, but appreciate you sharing some of your story, and for the audience for tuning into another amazing story and another entrepreneur.
Well, I think what I told you in your thank you note is that I really appreciate what you're doing for our industry, for the design industry, for architects, designers, builders. Just, I think this is an incredible platform, and just so grateful.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. No, I love people, and it only works when there's, like I said, it takes two to tango. So we need some dancing partners, and we have a great community that shows up for each other.
Yeah, we
and
do.
It's really just providing a way for people to learn from each other. I mean, that's the point of the podcast. That's the point of the collectives. We have so much collective knowledge to share, and a lot of us don't learn, speaking of myself, don't learn great. I mean, not that I wasn't a good student, but I learn by hearing stories. I learn from you sharing your experiences, failures and success. And I think there's a lot of us out there like that want to hear a story. And I'm grateful that people feel called to share and feel comfortable doing so. And so as long as that's the case, we'll be doing this.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, likewise. All right, here is a little Easter egg. If you're still listening to this episode, Mary Wozniak just left the office and we were leaving, and she said, how'd the interview do? And so we were just commenting on, what a great interview it was and how we really just always enjoy being around each other. And if you missed it, we were talking about this couch that showed up to Mary's client's house 2 days before Christmas, and it was inside out. The blue and pink fabric was on the inside, and the fabric cushion was on the outside. And so she told me the story in the stairwell. I'm like, I've got to go re-record that and put that as an Easter egg. So the story behind that is when she called the manufacturer, she said, how could that happen? Like, how could anybody think the foam goes to the outside? And he said, Mary, these are inmates putting this together. And she's like, I didn't want to say that. I'm like, that's actually pretty funny. I was like, that story has to be told. So what was equally impressive is, if you recall, he got that turned around in 2 days. So they must have brought that back to the prison workshop or wherever it was, and they pulled out every single stitch by hand and reupholstered the whole couch back together in 2 days and delivered it. And that couch lasted for 25 years. So kudos to inmates and Cell Block C for putting it back together the right way the second time. Thanks for tuning in the Curious Builder podcast. We might have to do more Easter eggs. These are kind of fun. We've had the podcast now for 2.5, almost 3 years now, and we have a consulting page, one-to-one consulting. You can book my time for 1 hour. Perhaps you've heard a guest where you like one of the topics. Maybe you want an introduction to some of the guests that I've had on. Perhaps you want to talk about branding or marketing or anything that we've covered on the podcast over the last 2.5 years. You can book a time at curiousbuilderpodcast.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like this episode, do us a favor, share it with 3 other business owners. The best way that we can spread what we're doing is by word of mouth, and with your help, we can continue to help other curious builders expand their business. Please share it with your friends, like and review online, and thanks again for tuning in.